What's going on, everyone? Today we're going to be ranking all 9 Alien movies from the worst to the best. Obviously, with Alien Romulus just releasing, this is definitely a perfect time to do this. I do have reactions to quite a few of these Alien movies on my channel. I'll put a link in the description to that playlist, so you can go check out some of the reactions to the original Alien, Aliens, Alien Covenant, Prometheus, and I believe Alien vs. Predator. So let's get right into this. Coming in last place in the number 9 spot is Aliens vs. Predator Requiem. And this is the only movie on this list that I genuinely think is just a bad film all around. Every other movie I think has enough things to it that I like that makes it, I would say, at least an average film. This one though, there's not many good aspects of it. I would say there's maybe like 10 minutes of Alien vs. Predator action that's like fine, like I enjoy it somewhat, but the rest of the movie is just downright bad. The story is really bad, the characters are bad, the plot lines within these characters, there's so much going on, there's so many different groups of characters, and they don't really mesh well together at all. If you're gonna have a movie with a bunch of different plot lines, you have to find a way to mesh them together and have them kind of work off of each other, whether it's thematically or actually just physically, but none of that really happens here, so none of that works for me. The action itself, although like I said, some of it's fine, a lot of it sucks. A lot of it's just shot really poorly. The lighting is awful, so you can barely see what's actually happening. And I would say it has some of the worst CGI effects out of any of these movies. So all around, this movie is just a complete miss. I don't think there's really many positives for it. It's, like I said, the only movie on here that I would say is just straight up bad. In number 8 spot, I've got Alien 3. So Alien 3 is a movie that I don't think is bad. I think it's just fine. Like, it's very average. I think there's certain elements that are fantastic. This is, of course, a David Fincher movie. He is an amazing director. He's actually one of my favorite directors of all time. And this movie does look well directed. Like, it is a well-made movie from that standpoint. It's just the story that I don't like. I don't think they found enough interesting things to tell with the character of Ripley coming after aliens, especially because they completely undo what Aliens built up. They had this whole amazing ending, and it just, to me, was really dumb to just start this next movie just completely undoing all that and saying, yeah, that movie, screw that movie, let's just start over from scratch with the same character. Like, at that point, you should have just done a different story with different characters. I don't know, that part always kind of irked me, but it doesn't offend me so much to the point where it ruins the movie, because I still think there are some good elements about this. For example, I like the aspect of Ripley being thrown into this prison with all these despicable people there, and then having that be the main set piece for the film, where you're in this, you know, space prison type place, and again, a lot of despicable people, but those people have to now fight against this xenomorph. There's also some elements of this movie that logically don't make a lot of sense, and I don't like the ending like at all. So there's just not enough to this movie that holds it up as being a decent Alien film, but I do think the way it's directed, it looks great. It's a good looking movie. David Fincher knows what he's doing from that standpoint, but I just don't think the story was good whatsoever. In number 7 spot, I've got Alien Resurrection, and Alien Resurrection is another movie that I think is actually really well directed. Like, I think it looks great. There's actually a really cool style to the directing here that, I don't know, I personally really enjoyed. It's very, very chaotic, and somehow that actually works quite well. It almost feels like a spiritual successor to Aliens, because there's a lot of action here, and there's some really cool set pieces. There's underwater scenes with xenomorphs, like stuff like that's really awesome. But I don't think the movie is just overall that interesting when it comes to a thematic standpoint or the story itself. Obviously, Ripley is now an android in this, which I think that concept is kind of cool. Like, it's a little weird, but it's also like, you know what? It makes sense why they're doing this. They're bringing back this really badass person because she's so badass and turning her into this android because, you know, after what happened in Alien 3, it was, I guess, an interesting way to bring Sigourney Weaver back into this role, and I actually think it works kind of decently well. It's just, again, the story here is just not good enough to hold up this movie. It's not good enough to keep it above being just an average film. It's a movie I enjoy to a degree. Like I said, most of these movies I think are pretty solid. In number 6 spot, I've got Alien vs. Predator, the first one, and this one I think is just a lot of fun, mindless action. That's really the best way to describe this movie. Yeah, there really isn't much depth to the story, but I think because of how fun it is compared to Alien Resurrection, Alien 3, there's just a lot more entertainment to it, whether it's just the actual Alien vs. Predator stuff going on or all the different characters just getting killed off one by one, which in a lot of ways it feels more like an Alien movie than a Predator movie, at least to me, even though apparently it's meant to be in the Predator universe as opposed to being in the Alien universe, but it always just felt more like an Alien movie to me personally. But I love how the action is actually shot here. It actually looks pretty solid. It's a lot better than it was in Requiem, and I like the setting as well, having it in the snow setting. That's really cool. The dialogue's pretty bad. I'll admit that. I think the dialogue for Resurrection was pretty bad too. But there is enough solid moments in this movie that just make it one of the most entertaining movies I've seen in a while. But there's definitely enough moments in this movie that make it highly entertaining. Now, I really miss these types of movies, these versus movies, taking two iconic characters, whether it's slasher icons or monsters, and just having them go at it. Like, I miss movies like that. I guess the most recent one we got was obviously Godzilla vs. Kong, but you know, we got Freddy vs. Jason back in 2003, and obviously the Alien vs. Predator movies. I want to see more stuff like this. Give us an Alien vs. Predator versus Terminator movie. I would watch the shit out of that. In number 5 spot, I've got Prometheus. Now, we are at the point where every movie from here on out, I think, is at least a good film. It's like a solid movie that I would highly recommend to anyone. I actually really enjoy these top 5 movies here. So Prometheus, I think, is definitely the weakest of the good Alien movies, where I definitely think, you know, it works better as a non-Alien movie than it does as an Alien movie, because obviously there are no xenomorphs in here, at least not until the very end. And I didn't know that going into the movie, so my expectations were very different. I was expecting just a typical Alien movie with a bunch of xenomorphs. I like how it is a prequel to Alien, and it actually doesn't show you xenomorphs until the very end, because it's showing the beginnings of them. It's showing how they came to be, how they were created. And the way Ridley Scott goes about that with the story is actually quite brilliant, having this character of David here who is like really interested in the idea of creation, because, you know, he obviously came from Wayland, who was all about creation. Obviously he wanted to find out who their creators were, and then they actually found the people who created humans, which was a really crazy revelation. But then they find out about this whole other species, and David becomes obsessed with the idea of this perfect species. And obviously that gets touched on a lot more in the next movie, but at least the starts of it were here in Prometheus, and I thought it was really interesting. I do think I was missing the xenomorph stuff though. I kind of wish this movie, you know, introduced the xenomorphs maybe in like the really end of the second act, and then the third act was full of xenomorphs, or at least somewhat. I think that would have worked a little bit better for me, because then it still would have retained that classic Alien feel while still having a very new direction as a prequel. I just think that would have been better, but at the end of the day, it still is a solid movie. I also think it took too long to get into things. There was like a long 45-minute beginning piece, which it looked beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it took a little too long to get into it. You know, it took a little too long to actually get to the stuff that I found to be way more entertaining. And most Alien movies have a slow burn feel to it, don't get me wrong, but like that slow burn has to be good though. I didn't find the slow burn in this movie to be that great. Maybe because I didn't like the characters as much, but I don't know. Some of the characters were good though. I liked Ellie quite a bit towards the end of the movie for sure. And obviously David is fantastic. Michael Fassbender does an amazing job in that role. In number 4 spot is going to be the original Alien from 1979. And now that might shock some people. I know there's a lot of people who are going to put this in number 1 or at least number 2, but for me, it's number 4. It's no knock on the movie. I still love it, but there's just 3 I like a lot more. But yeah, I mean, this is just a really well-made sci-fi horror, and almost in some ways a slasher, where, you know, there's a lot of build up to what's going on this ship with this new thing they picked up, and it's great. I mean, the chest burst scene is iconic, obviously, and then just them getting hunted down one by one by this xenomorph, and having a singular xenomorph there being as terrifying as it is. Obviously nowadays with the Alien movies, they'll throw in a bunch of xenomorphs to make it just kind of crazier, but even just having one there, how terrifying it could be, just the way they show off how the xenomorph is fantastic. Obviously you have the character of Ripley, who was amazing in this movie. She's amazing in all the ones she's in, but she was great here as well. I like a lot of the other characters as well. Dallas was great. Actually, the first time I watched this movie, I felt like Dallas was the main character in the beginning, and then they eventually revealed that no, it's actually Ripley, which I thought was a cool kind of subversion there. But it's a terrifying movie, and they did a great job with it. Everything in terms of how the xenomorph looks and how the suspense drives the narrative when it comes to every now and then showing it off, but not showing off too much, because you want to obviously save it for later scenes. But all of it is quite brilliant, at least in my opinion. So fantastic movie. I really don't have any negatives for it. It's just, I don't think it's better than the top 3 here. In number 3 spot is going to be Alien Covenant, and this was a solid follow-up to Prometheus, and basically took the aspects I liked about Prometheus and turned it into aspects that I suddenly loved in Alien Covenant, and even throw in the xenomorphs. So like I feel like it had everything I wanted, where you had the interesting conversations about creation with David, but you also had the alien action with the xenomorphs, which looked great. Obviously some people weren't happy with the xenomorphs being, you know, mostly CGI, but I thought it looked fine. Like I didn't for a single moment sit and look at it and go, oh my god, that looks terrible. No, it looked great. And the actual action set pieces and sequences with the xenomorphs were amazing, especially in the third act. The tension building was fantastic here, and the actual build up to everything that's going on was, I think, a lot better than Prometheus as well. So all around, I feel like this was just, again, taking what I love about Prometheus and just turning it up to 100, just doing a lot more with it, which is exactly what I wanted out of this movie. I think David as a villain is just such a fantastic character. I honestly didn't see it coming as well, which is interesting because you can watch Prometheus, and if you miss like 1 or 2 scenes, you won't even realize that David's a villain. Maybe that was just my fault. Maybe I'm just stupid, but when I watched Prometheus, I didn't really put it together that David's supposed to be the villain here. And then obviously when you watch Covenant, it's very, very clear, and he is an amazing villain. Obviously he's just so well acted by Michael Fassbender, but just the ideals and the conversations he has with even just Walter in this movie is amazing. Some of the best dialogue from any Alien movie comes from Alien Covenant, at least in my opinion. So everything just felt so satisfying, and that end reveal is one of the best like twists I've ever seen. I was just, oh my god, it was such a good, solid film all around. Didn't really have any problems with it, but I just don't think it's better than my top 2. In number 2 spot, and I want to make this absolutely clear, these top 2, you can probably interchange them, and I honestly might interchange them later on because I don't really know which one I feel very confident about, at least in this point. So don't really take this choice too seriously. Both these movies could definitely be tied, but it was so hard to choose, and I sat there thinking really, really hard about it. But number 2, it's going to be Aliens, right? And I know everyone's going to freak out because I'm like, oh my, how could you possibly do that to Aliens? It's my ranking. Who cares? I love this movie. I feel like taking this simple sci-fi horror slasher that the first one was and turning it into a sci-fi action movie was brilliant. It's like the best way to do a sequel, in my opinion. You're taking the same premise, but you're kind of just turning it up to 1,000, and you're also turning it into basically a different genre entirely. And it's fantastic. I mean, you have great actors here: Michael Biehn, Bill Paxton, and obviously Ripley returns. Sigourney Weaver returns as Ripley. And so many amazing moments from the Alien franchise. Some of the best moments come from this movie itself. You got, you know, the Queen Xenomorph in it. You got so many different Xenomorphs. And the first time you actually see that many in one moment, it's like mind-blowing, because obviously one Xenomorph was terrifying in the original Alien, but getting a sequel with a bunch of them is like, it's just insane. And obviously there are some criticisms for this movie because, yeah, do they make the Xenomorphs maybe slightly nerfed because you have to make it actually work? Because, you know, obviously with how terrifying the Xenomorph was in the first one, you have a bunch of them in this one. You would think, how isn't everyone going to get wiped out immediately, right? Sure, but that's kind of the whole point. It is an action movie full forced, but I feel like they find a way to make it work. Like they find a way to make it so, okay, you understand why these characters were able to escape that room in that moment. You understand why they were able to get away from the Xenomorphs. And obviously most of them do end up dying, as with most Alien movies. And I just think the actual scenes surrounding it, James Cameron just does such a good job with just making it one of the most entertaining action films of all time. And surrounding this movie is a fantastic narrative between the character of Ripley and Newt. It has this whole motherhood narrative going on where she's now taking care of this child, and having that at the heart of the film is what makes it all work so well. Obviously, if it was just mindless action, it wouldn't work that well, but when you have a solid character dynamic, you then start to care about what's going on. You start to care about these characters enough to the point where the action is just a lot more intense, because action's always going to be more intense when you care about the characters. That's just inevitable. But in the number 1 spot is going to be Alien Romulus. And don't get me wrong, I've been known to sometimes have, you know, the honeymoon phase with some movies. I did that for the Batman. I mean, I still love the Batman, don't get me wrong, but if you guys saw my Batman ranking, I put the Batman in the number 1 spot after seeing it when I did the Batman ranking. But later on, I realized, no, I actually think The Dark Knight is better, and then I put The Dark Knight above it, and then the Batman's in number 2 spot today. But this, I don't know, will my opinion change in a few months? Perhaps, but currently I think it is my favorite Alien film. I think it just took the best aspects of pretty much a lot of the other Alien films and kind of mushed it together in a way that works quite well. And they also turned a lot of those elements up to 1,000. Obviously, it's a modern day film. There's a lot more technology they're able to use, and it looks amazing. The practical effects are fantastic, but there are also other visual effects that they're using, obviously, for the scenery and the look of space itself. And it's easily the best looking Alien film. I would say it's one of the best looking movies of the past decade. Rain and Andy are solid characters, probably my favorite duo of this entire franchise, one of my favorite duos in recent memory in a film, and I love the conversations of AI here. I mean, obviously most of these movies have those conversations, have those themes, but I think there is such an interesting story they tell with the character of Andy, who is of course the android in this movie, or the synthetic, whatever you want to call him. The setup is very compelling. You have these characters who just want to get off this mining planet. They don't want to be there anymore. It's a very depressing place to be, and they're not having really good living conditions. They just want to get to a better planet that's safer and more comfortable to live in. And their only way to do it is to get onto this abandoned ship and take some cryopods so they can actually get to that planet and go into cryo sleep, so they're not losing 9 years of their lives to get there. But you know, they obviously come across the station, and that's where the whole xenomorphs come into play. So when you have this compelling narrative, you have this compelling story, you're going to care a lot more about the characters because you want them to succeed more than anything. Not all the Alien movies really have that. A lot of the other ones are just kind of like, okay, you just have characters here who are just trying to survive, and that's it. But no, they have a much bigger motivation to get on this ship and get to where they need to be. They're not just here just to scrap some parts and, you know, just use it for whatever. And they're also not here for, you know, some corporation reason. It's all based around them trying to just get to where they want to be, and that makes the characters a lot more interesting and, in my opinion, a lot better. I love these characters quite a bit. I think they all work really well. Even the ones that die early on, I think, are really solid. They're fun to watch. The acting was great, and the tension building is probably some of my favorite in the franchise. There's so many intense sequences, there's so many nail-biting sequences that were incredible to watch in IMAX. It has these horror elements of Alien, but it also has the action of Aliens, and it also has a lot of elements from Prometheus and even Alien Resurrection all thrown into this movie. And some people are going to call that a bad thing. They're going to say, oh, that's just a bunch of fan service. It didn't feel like fan service for me, except for maybe a couple moments. There was a couple lines of dialogue that were definitely attempting to just, you know, get a kick out of the audience, and I don't think that ruined the movie for me. Would I consider it a problem with the movie? Sure, definitely, but not enough to hold it back from being my personal favorite Alien movie of all time. I would love to go see this again because, like I said, just everything about it I think was so damn good. Fede Alvarez did a fantastic job with it. I was fully expecting him to, because he's just a damn good filmmaker. So that is my ranking of all the Alien movies from the worst to the best. I would love to hear your guys' ranking in the comment section down below. If you want to see my reactions to quite a few different Alien movies, go check those out. If you want to see my review for Alien Romulus, go check that out. And of course, if you want to see my reaction to some of the Predator movies as well, definitely go check that out, as well as my Predator ranking. I also did a Predator movie ranking a few years ago. So I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.